Thanks everybody for showing up. First, a few quick words. So you will get the slide deck directly at the end. There will be a QR code, so you don't need to photograph anything. A lot of the slides are building upon the work of others. So then I referenced it on the corner, in the left down corner. So you don't need to write, you can just focus. And yeah, with that said, let's start. Who here in the audience is a certified Scrum Master? Who here is a certified PO? Okay, so I'm none of those. So I'm a startup founder, and I'm always in roles of chief product or chief tech officer, preferable both at the same time. So I'm responsible at the end for the process and for the outcome. And today I want to share how I see true interdisciplinary collaboration aside from standard Scrum and other certified practices maybe out there. But I want to start with a little bit of a story. So we are back in the year 1913. Henry Ford was already a successful car manufacturer, but he has not built a multinational corporation yet. And when we look at the manufacturing process in this year, we see the cars, they are standing still, and the workers, they move around the cars. And with this way, he could build one car in one place, and it took 12 hours to build a single car. And now, a couple of years later, in between, he had a brilliant idea. Instead of people moving around the cars can move to the workers, like on a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt was already invented. He just leveraged it. And so the workers, they could specialize on one single task. Like there's one guy for fastening the screws, there's another guy for fastening the blinkers or whatever. So the conveyor belt and the specialization basically became the blueprint for the Industrial Revolution. And I think today we are applying it too often also for knowledge work. Because building software, we are not on an assembly line because building software is the design process itself. On an assembly line, people can specialize about something that somebody else already designed. The car is already designed. You can just really specialize in execution. But building software is really the design process. So if you are building software, or the teams that are building software, they are doing creative decisions all day long. They're solving the problem, that they're designing the software while they are doing it. So we don't have a long manufacturing line in software, but we have a very long design process. And so we need to optimize how decisions are made and what freedom we give to the people to do them. And if I look as an outsider on the state of Scrum and Agile, then some might say Agile now means we do half of Scrum poorly and use Jira. This is Andy Hunt. He wrote the book, The Pragmatic Programmer. And who can relate with this quote? Maybe raise your hands. Thank you. And if you look where we are coming from, I mean, the coders back then, they had a vision. They had a plan. It was all about individuals, interactions, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change. I mean, nothing of this is wrong. But then why aren't living it today? And here, I mean, even smallest of teams, they can end up with waterfall at the end. So we do Agile and Scrum, but then we have no real product ownership, or we have a product owner that is just responsible to external stakeholders. They want predictability, and then we have roadmaps, and then we have business pressure, and everything is then optimized towards efficiency. And when a team faces a pressure of efficiency, then it ends up in everybody working on his or her own. Then we end up with different development and product organizations. And at the end, even the smallest of teams are ending up with what I then call Scrum fall. And if you look at then how such a team is operating with a different development and product org, then maybe the designer is doing 30, 40 Figma screens, but then at the end, the developers don't have the time to implement all of them. So the design and production is something different than the design in Figma. It's not just the designers. I don't want to blame this. It's the same for the developers. If they just lean back and say, yeah, if you could just fill out a Jira ticket, that would be great, and then I can do it, and then I can go home at the end of the day. But even in that situation, let's maybe imagine a situation where we have a perfectly working ticket system. I can pick a ticket out of it, and then I work on it, and it's perfectly specified, and everything is good. But even then, in the most cases, I cannot work like this, because to implement the ticket, I need to disturb 5 other people, or I am disturbed by 5 others to implement one single ticket. So the company that is driving on tickets is at the end it's working in a hyperactive hive mind mode. And then at the end, when time is out, we need to do trade-offs, because shit is falling off because we don't have enough time. And then we need to do the trade-offs at the end. This means most of the times the developers are doing the trade-offs because they're out of time. But we don't do the trade-offs maybe synchronized with the strategic aspect of the work that we want to tackle. So to bring this point, building software basically is making decisions in continuously evolving systems. And this is why the conveyor belt metaphor for specialized workers does not work for knowledge work, because we are solving problems all the time. So we need to rethink how people are making decisions. And the first step on rethinking how people are making the decisions is how to slice the actual work. And when I think about how to slice work, I'm thinking about how can we slice objectives, problems, solutions, and even how can we slice delivery. And it's not just about slicing them, it's also about making it very clear that those are different things. Because sometimes stakeholders come already with a solution to a product manager, and then it's very important to just find out what problem is it that we are solving, actually. But let's start at the highest level. Slicing objectives is the easiest rule. I always say we need to force rank the objectives. There could only be one most important thing, and we need to force rank them. There cannot be 2 things at the same time. So those are only just 2 examples. Either we are focusing on engagement in our product strategy, on growth, or on monetization. We cannot focus on all 3 at the same time, because only then we can use an objective as a good filter if it's a problem worth working on. Or if we start something new, are we proving the business model? Are we proving that customers trust us with their sensitive data maybe? Or are we proving that we're actually making an impact? So this is a business strategy level. It's very easiest rule, but the hardest to implement. Only one objective at a time. And then it's about slicing problems. So if you slice a problem, it's very important to look at what is our current context and what is our outcome, what is our desired outcome, without talking about the solution too early. For example, a stakeholder or somebody has a feature request like, I need a Kanban board. And then a good product manager does not just write epics and tickets to implement the product, a Kanban board. They really go deep into it and talk with the customer or the stakeholder, where is this feature request coming from, without talking about a solution, understanding it. And then maybe when the customer says, I need a Kanban board, or a stakeholder, what he maybe ultimately needs is just an update when the status is changing of a project or something like that. And then you can find out different solutions. So it's very important to go very deep into it. This is an example from a real project, like a good defined problem. It's really just 2 paragraphs at the end. It should also not be very much more, because then it's too much and people don't understand it anymore. It's really just, this is strategic context, we have customer pressure, we have USP misalignment, we have compliance risk, and our desired outcome. And when I then frame, and this is the term for doing this, framing a problem in this way, then it's actually very easy for a team to shape a solution for it. And a problem is not just about the problem specification, it's also about a certain appetite. So I have defined the problem, and now I also need to define how much of an appetite do I have to implement this problem. Like, appetite means fixed time, variable scope. For such a problem, I could define an appetite. I have an appetite of implementing it in 1 week, or I have an appetite of implementing it in 6 weeks. And depending on my appetite, the team then can come up with different solutions. And only in this way, when I specify the problem and then talk about the appetite, I can really strategically allocate my resources. And if you think about it, appetite is the real opposite of estimates, because with estimates, you have a fixed scope because the solution is already defined, but you always end up with a variable time because it takes longer and longer and longer. And this is just in the nature of things because we have a lot of unknowns when we're developing software. And if you think about the iron triangle or cross, or then the cost and the time in this way of working is always fixed. And on quality, we cannot compromise because it will create problems down the line. So the only thing that you can do is to have a variable scope in working. And if you work in this way, then you need to do trade-offs all the time. And you need to do trade-offs with all of the disciplines at the table. You need to do product, design, and engineering trade-offs at the same time. And all three of them, engineering as well, is too often neglected in reality or does not want, also another reality. They three together, they need to do at the beginning, do the raw, the strategic, the centralized, aligned trade-offs. And at the end, maybe other people from this discipline then are doing the details, the tactical, the distributed and decisions, and they do it in an autonomous way. So it's about doing trade-offs all the time and not just doing trade-offs at the end because the time is running out. There's some very important mental model, I feel, that engineering, product and design talking about things. And how to do this? So there's a method called Shape Up, and it's basically like Basecamp, the company Basecamp, they open sourced how they approach product development, how their process is. And basically the idea behind Shape Up is you start at a blank slate and then you collaborate on a problem, all three of the disciplines at the same time. And then you use a technique, for example, called breadboarding. Breadboarding comes from electronic tinkering. This is a breadboard, and you really try to find out the elements that you need before you build your PCB in a factory process. This breadboard, for example, I need a pre-done USB port, I need some transistors there, and I need some cables to wire this up. And the team that's starting on a blank slate can work in the same way in a Miro board, for example. So this is a finished breadboarding where the team, product, design, and engineering had nothing than the problem framing. And then all three of them go into it and collaborate with the same tools. And then we end up with a high-level interaction flow, and the fidelity of the tools used is so low that everybody can contribute. It's not a wireframing tool that the developers cannot use because it's too complicated. It's post-its, arrows, and fat marker sketches, and everybody can contribute. Everybody can draw a line or remove one or change the name of a sticky. And then slowly the shape of the solution comes out of this collaboration. And then when such a team thinks about how to implement this solution, they ideally dissect it into different scopes. Like one scope, we work on one scope first, then on the next scope, then on the next scope. And here the goal is really to structure the work around the structure of the project and not around the people. So you don't want to have such a scope map that says, we do 30 Figma screens first, and then the API is prepared, and then the front end is prepared, and then at the end, in the last week, we bring everything together. You really want to structure the work about doing the most important things first, and you want to have your whole team working on the same scope at the same time. And when we do such a thing in the kickoff exercise, then I always come from the right and I say, now if we cut the project here, does it still make sense? If we cut it here, does it still make sense? If we cut it here, does it still make sense? Because we are in a fixed time box, and it's more important to be precise with the time box and to deliver all the things. And if you start with the most important thing first, then you can work in such a way that the time box with a limited time, that you cannot deliver everything. But it's very important for the team to constantly reprioritize what they are working on. And those scopes, they could even change during working on the implementation of the thing. There's an example from a real life workshop. Here you see the cutoff line, and what maybe most of the cases this will not get done, but what at the planning stage maybe does not get done. And then, as I said, it's important that all three of the departments, or mostly design and engineering, are working on the same thing at the same time. Because if you only prepare front end, nothing works. If you only prepare here a little bit of front end, here a little bit of API there, nothing works. Only if front end and back end, or design means front end also in this case, work together on the same thing at the same time, then something works. And then you can work in this mode where you stop when your time box is over. So as I said, you need to implement by structure and not by person. It's very important to note this is sometimes difficult for designers because designers cannot make some decisions before they have not done other parts of the application. So for me, this is an idealized picture from the Shape Up book, but around 80% you should strive to work in this way. You can always still refactor things, and also engineers need to think about architecture. So everybody needs to do a little bit of lateral thinking, but 80% of the time you should be in a working mode like this, where you're actually finishing things. If you work like this, slicing delivery, it's really a piece of cake. And you want to have one layer you want to have a piece with all of the layers. And yeah, the team like this, how is then reporting on progress based on the scopes that I've just showed you. So this is a so-called hill chart. It's also from Basecamp. And the idea behind is that work is not a linear progress. It's about we have a part where we're figuring things out, and then we have a part where we're just making it happen. And then the scopes that as a team defined work along this hill. And for me as a leader, it's very easy to see, are there unknowns? Are there an uphill phase? Are they working on too much of the scopes at the same time? Because we implemented this as a reporting structure for our weekly team meetings for the bigger teams, where the other teams can also see the hill charts from the others. And then you also see the cutoff point, because it needs a constant discussion about what can we deliver in the time box and what not. And this is the big picture then. Yeah? You have one objective, you have clearly defined problems, you slice your solutions in a way that you can always cut it, and then you deliver it all layers at the same time. It's on how does teams need to be structured to work in this way? They need to be product teams. There's this concept of empowered product teams from Marty Kagan. And the idea is that only a team that is cross-functional but also measured on outcomes can really work in such a way that they will really work cross-collaborational. And what does it mean? Such a team needs a product manager, and product manager is not a PO in this term, because I know some people use PO as a job description. For me, PO is not a job description. For me, it's a role in Scrum. And we don't do Scrum, so I always look for a product manager, really people that could be responsible for customer value and for owning the business viability risk. Like really look at these traits and not if they are certified and can write tickets and those kind of things. It's really important that you can own those topics and work on those topics across the organization. And designers then are owning the usability risk and the experience. We need in-sourced engineers because you don't want to have a boundary in between. In such a team, they are responsible for the feasibility risk and the delivery. And if you look at all the possible working modes of a team, you really want to have a working mode where a team is starting, where a team can select its own opportunities and then work on it cross-collaboration. Only then it's a real product team for me. And if you have a product team like this, it's very easy to steer this product team because you give the product team objectives. They are doing their own discovery. The product manager is doing discovery on problems and solutions, and they're not implementing it. You can have a layer where you discuss the problems that the team is tackling. This is a good point to integrate senior management, so they have at least an alignment, understanding of what problem they're working on. But if you look at it, the team from this perspective, it's even more important that you give the team the right objectives. And then this is the biggest challenge for the leaders here. Yeah, and there's Brooks' law. Brooks' law says communication scales exponentially. So if you look 3 people, they have 3 lines of communication because everyone is talking to 2 others. If you have 7 people, everyone is talking to 6 others, and now you have 21 lines of communication. And so communication scales exponentially. And this is why I'm really looking to always bring the right 2 or 3 people together at the same time. Like if we are de-risking, if we are shaping such a project, then I try to bring in the most senior people, senior product, senior engineer, senior designer, and then to only implementing such a thing in the time box, there's more flexibility also for others. But always bring together 2 or 3 people and enable them to make trade-offs on a strategic level or on a tactical level. And yeah, it's also important, you need to enable such a team to work autonomously by having also a layer of enablement work. So 2 or 3 other people who take care of all of the reactive work. And then suddenly you have a lot of pairings of 2 or 3 people. They naturally can only work at so much things at the same time. And then you have pretty good work in progress limits everywhere, just by default, because you have slides to work differently. And yeah, basically this is what startups do. It's small teams in long cycles committing on one thing. And how could we bring people to work in this mode? I always like to think about emancipating the team. I don't like to say you are empowered to do this or that, because this puts me in a position where I dictate something from above, and then at the end it's my fault. Instead, I believe in the creativity of each individual, and then rather work with coaching techniques to bring them in a way that they feel emancipated to fulfill such roles. And if you need commitments, it's very important that they come from the team and not the manager. And what I also needed to learn was that senior tech leadership is more about facilitation, shared learning for the team, and not bringing all the answers by myself. So sometimes you need to take a step back and let the team gather their own experiences, and you are just there to ask the right questions. But you can always try, if you don't want to risk something, maybe you want to try out ShapeUp, you can put half of the team in ShapeUp while keeping your standard Scrum sprints of 2 weeks, and then you do it with one half of the team, then you do it with the other half of the team. And magically, if the whole team had the experience of working 6 weeks uninterrupted on one problem, then it's a very easy sell to change the process from Scrum to ShapeUp or to something different. And before you do that, nobody can complain because you're not changing the main process. But if you have all the momentum, it's very easy to change the process. And yeah, it's also important to celebrate tensions, and I always try to show that show some vulnerability also as a leader, because as I said, working in this way, it really surfaces tensions because you're much closer connected to how you are working together. In a ticket, it's very easy to talk about, this ticket is not specified, and then it goes back. Or here the typo is too small implemented by the engineer, and the ticket goes back. If you have those long loops, then it's very easy to have a large bureaucratic monster. But if you're working very closely related to what problem are we solving, then you will have a lot of tensions. And I see those as good tensions, because it helps us to optimize the process without talking too much about how are we implementing the Scrum rules, or we need the Scrum Masters not doing the work good, or those kind of things. So it's a more direct way of working. And yeah, another thing you could try is working with memes. So if I see a certain behavior in the team, so for example, there was one team, they always had too much scope while they were shaping the work. And then when somebody said, hey, let's cut the scope, then I tried to reinforce this behavior by creating a very silly badge generated with ChatGPT in a version over a year ago. And so if I see some behavior, I create a meme out of it, and then I bring it onto my robot, and then people start adopting it and also saying it to each other. Another team was trying to think about too much details too early on, then we created this is a problem for later batch. This was in a time where ChatGPT cannot write properly. But it is part of the fun. This is part of the fun, it's part of the joke, and then this batch is there, and it goes over into the next shaping project, and then you really can force the behavior to a certain degree. Or the time bomb batch, sometimes when you are in such a shaping phase where you're shaping the work, there can be stuff that you need to figure out, because if you don't figure it out, it will blow up in the execution phase. So it's also very important to think about things that could blow up later. Like those are just examples for how to introduce some new behavior into a team, working with memes. And yeah, last but not least, it's very important to think about breaking silos, not people. Like, if you want to change people, you must really care about them and not just force new rules and new reporting structures and so on upon them. You really must care about them and their individual issues. If a designer is maybe not comfortable with the way of working, then you need to go into a coaching mindset and work with him or her. What could be done differently, and then help changing it. So that's my call to action. Always optimize for decision making and limit the people involved. So back to Henry Ford maybe, don't make the mistake of reinventing the conveyor belt, because knowledge work or learning work, as we heard today, it really has different challenges than doing real work in the real world. So yeah, software isn't manufacturing, it's creative discipline, so treat it as a creative discipline, and where people need to interact and work together. And yeah, good starting points are methods like Shape Up, empowered product teams, and reading books like Team Topologies. This would be good starting points. But at the end, you need to experiment with different ways of working and really care about your people. And here is my last slide. This is my homepage. I'm also on LinkedIn. I like to talk about those kind of things very often, especially on LinkedIn. And yeah, there's the QR code for the slides. And thank you, everybody.